Welcome to Beyond Bite Wings, the business side of dentistry, brought to you by Edwards and Associates PC. Join us as we discuss how to build your dental practice, optimize your income, and plan for your future. This podcast is distributed with the understanding that Edwards and Associates PC is not rendering legal, accounting, or professional advice. Listeners should consult with their business advisors before acting on any of the information that is shared. At Edwards and Associates PC, our business is the business of dentistry. For help or more information, visit our website at eandassociates.com. Hello and welcome to another episode of Beyond Bite Wings. My name is Ash, and in today's episode, we have a very special guest. His name is Matt Gruber with COtingency, and we would like to talk about a subject matter that comes up quite often, specifically when I'm talking to my clients and towards this time of the year. And it has a lot to do with if a business owner or the practice owner is not available, whether it be because of transition reasons or personal reasons, how is your business set up to operate on its own, or for that gap when the main primary owner, so to speak, is not there? So to talk further about it, Matt, how are we doing today?
Doing great, thanks. Appreciate you having me on and excited to talk about dentists vanishing.
That's right, right? So, why are so many successful businesses still dangerously dependent on one or two people?
Great question. I think that when you're a high performing practitioner or an owner of an organization, there's oftentimes an ego that's caught up in it where we believe that only we can do what it is that we do. And so therefore that kind of gets in the way of our ability to delegate and to plan for others. Another is a fear that just those around us are going to fall short or that we can't trust them with such serious information. Another big thing that we see is that everyone gets so busy and caught up in the grind of both personal and professional life. So to talk about kind of handing all that stuff off is overwhelming, and there just really isn't time in the day. And if the issue isn't pressing you kind of right in the face, then it's something that you'll just get to. Those are, I think, the pretty main reasons why.
I see. I think that's all the more reasons why there should be some cadences set in place and proper division of labor, so to speak.
Sure. A lot of it comes down to what's someone's motivator for actually taking care of this and making sure that those around them are capable and have the tools ready to take over and do what they need to do. Some people are motivated by more money. And so if you can make yourself replaceable, your business is actually worth more money. Some people are interested in spending more time with family or the kids or on the golf course. And so time is really the value there. You can't have that time if the business keeps sucking you back into things. And other people want to just take care of those around them, make sure they're empowered, give people a chance at opportunity they've been promising for a while. And so that could be the motivator to get it done. And then, of course, we see health scares. When someone gets a bad diagnosis or has a heart attack or a stroke or something like that, it's usually a good impetus to get some things in place so that you can go focus on healing and do what you got to do.
That's right. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned this. The topic we're talking about, I feel like 10 years ago was something that we had to let our clients know that time is one of those resources that cannot be bought. It's limited, scarce, and that should be part of your future planning. And it seems like post 2019 or post COVID, I've had many clients that reach out to me and specifically ask for that how can I make my business or my practice become more owner absentee and be able to spend more time with my family.
Hmm. Yeah, I was meeting with one client recently, he's kind of in the mid-range of baby boomer generation, and he's finally getting out of his business. He sold it, and what impacted him to start doing this kind of planning was he was with a bunch of his buddies, and they were giving him a hard time because he was just still too caught up in the business all the time, and they were enjoying a lot more time away from work. They were either in retirement or in transition to do so, and they had clearly taken steps to make that happen. And they gave him a hard time because they said, you don't have a lot of QTL. And he asked them what that was, and it was all about quality time left. So it's not even just a matter of time, but it's a matter of, okay, in what decade of life are we in and what do we want to go enjoy? And if you haven't planned for that, forget how, you based on average lifespan, you may have 35 years left, but more than half of that might be spent doing a lot less than you think. So, how are you going to maximize this time? And if you're really tied up in your business without the ability to go do other things that matter to you, just because of either financial resources or because of the way the business is dependent upon you, then um, you're not going to have a lot of quality time.
That's right. Yeah. So, Matt, in your opinion, at what point does founder intuition stop being an advantage and start becoming a liability?
Great question. So, what we've seen is when they possess too much knowledge about their business, about their people, the subject matter expertise, when there's just too much caught up in their head and it's not documented and it's not meaningfully handed off to others, that's when it becomes a liability. It means that they're the ones who are worth so much, not the business, which makes it not only worth less on the market when it's time to sell it, but also means that if something were to happen to them in an untimely way and they did exit through some illness or situation with their family that they needed to take off time, the business takes a monstrous hit. And those around them aren't set up for success. So I would say if there's too much stuck in their head, they got to get it out and they got to make it useful for other people.
Ah, I see. No, you raise a good point because, oftentimes when we see dental practices use their own names, we tell them something similar that, if whenever you're ready to sell the practice or, transition, a huge chunk of that goodwill towards you. And if you're going to exit, they always use that as something to negotiate the price down by saying, hey, that's your name up there. And if you're not going to be working, you can't be asking for that much goodwill because you're
Yeah.
basically
Yeah.
taking it with you.
Yeah, trade names can be spectacular when branded well and having a good identity in advance of the sale, right? I was fortunate enough to have done that before my exit. I changed it away from my name. I had a professional services practice, much like your clients, and it carried my name for almost a decade. And then I made a transition to a trade name and really pushed the publicity of that, and it worked. It made it that much more, transitionable. But the thing that made my transition the easiest was that I had taken everything that I knew and transferred that not only to my team but to my buyer. And that allowed me to dictate the terms of when and how much I wanted to sell my business for.
Mm. So what I'm hearing is pre-planning and proactive. Being proactive is key if you're in a situation like this.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't mean that you have to do it, forever in advance. It just, you got to get it done.
Mhm.
You got to hand off your institutional knowledge, your expertise. And that may not be to one person, right? It may, uh, your listeners may be thinking, well, nobody's me. Nobody can do what I do, or nobody knows what I know. And that's true. We're all very unique. But what we do possess, we can certainly get out in some medium and give it to a few other people, so that the baton that gets handed off.
Mhm. Now, again, in your experience, what usually breaks first when a key leader suddenly exits a business?
Okay, so when it's a sudden departure, okay, kind of an unexpected one, the first thing that breaks is access to accounts, data, information, passwords, and unique software-based things, right? That's what breaks first, because usually most small to mid-sized businesses aren't well organized with password wallets and legal flow of access to information. What that looks like is a sudden exit could mean payroll all of a sudden stopping. It could mean that if you're working on a line of credit with a bank, they stop giving it to you because they find out something's happened to you. It could mean lack of access to support on some type of software that you're using to manage your practice because you're down and the person who has authority isn't specified. In a more planned exit where it's not so sudden, what we see breaking first is poor relationship handoffs from those inside and outside the organization in relation to ownership, meaning that owners typically have a better understanding and stickiness with those around them. But it's not just HR related. It's what makes people tick, what they want to listen to, who they want to listen to, what will make them, feel good on a Monday or upset them on a Friday. That type of knowledge doesn't get handed off. And so then we start seeing frays and relationships in the organization, and then that will break down pretty quickly, and you'll start seeing staff leaving, or you'll seeing vendors cancel relationships, or old clients that provide a lot of business terminating and moving elsewhere. And that can affect, your client's earnout if they're going to get paid post sale, or it could affect their legacy. But we see those
Mm,
things breaking first.
I see. Now, are there any steps that can be taken to safeguard themselves or their business from facing such breaking point?
Yeah. Yeah. So the first thing, it's a very basic concept. The solution is, something that we provide and a bit more elegant, but the concept is a very simple one. Get everything that you know out on the table and document it in some fashion. The challenge is sitting down and figuring out, okay, what is it that I know? What am I really great at? Who do I know? How do I know it? How do I do it? What's my secret sauce? In every aspect of the business, right? Not just in being a practitioner, if you're still, as a dentist, still seeing patients on a daily or weekly basis, but also the business of running a dental practice. There's a lot more that goes to being that entrepreneurial figure. And I think that depending on the dynamics, um, plenty of people sell themselves short on how much they really know or what kind of glue they really are to the organization. So the first step is just getting it all out there. Meeting with a qualified professional that can get it all out of you in a very fast way, because you don't want to be spending a ton of time doing this. It can be an arduous process to step away from the business and document all of this. So we find that our entrepreneurial clients and those that are also closer to retirement don't want to spend a ton of time in the immediacy or over time doing this. So I would say rapidly dump information.
Mm. Well, you coined the term secret sauce. What if the business owner thinks, well, if I make my secret sauce known
Mhm.
or I give out the secret, then I may lose value.
Yeah, that's a great point. The initial person or people or organization that you're working with to get everything out of your head and
Mhm.
documenting it should be a very trusted, qualified professional, right? This shouldn't be done during due diligence with your potential opponent in the buyer of your business. You don't give them all of your intellectual property. But if you're sitting down with somebody who's going to help you through this, they're going to organize the information and decide what is stuff that certain people should see and what stuff that only is for very select few eyes, right? Um, and so that's where the organization and distribution of this information becomes the next step that is really important. But first, we have to extract all of the information and identify what it all is.
Mm, I see.
Yeah.
Now, you did mention documenting things like putting out there what you know. Would you say, in your experience, that almost always with businesses, you see that they don't have things written down or documented, things that could be critical in their operations?
Yeah, yeah. We see plenty of organizations have well documented policy systems and procedures because that's a normal functioning aspect of operations within most professional businesses. Obviously, there are certain businesses that are better than others, but what we're seeing is the big deficiency is the knowledge dump, the institutional expertise and secret sauce held within ownership or leadership of the organization. The stuff that's all around relationships, around access to information, around how we do things and why we do things, that is almost never documented. And that's why we created a business solely around that, because oftentimes that's the lifeblood, that's the pulse of what makes that organization unique and worth what it's worth.
Mhm. So would you say that these create like silent operational risks? If, let's say, they have the mentality, and I'm not saying they all do it, but let's say if there are a few that think that, uh, maybe they have an informal way of making decisions and setting certain rules, and they just say, well, this is just how we do things.
Hmm.
So would it be an operational risk, like a silent one that may later come to
Absolutely.
on them?
Yeah, that is a critical risk. And so for perspective, for your listeners that might not know much about me, my background is as an estate and business law attorney. And I worked and I sold a practice that helped, much like your clients, entrepreneurial business owners in doing their planning. And we made sure that our clients had excellent, legal documentation in place for sudden or longer term transitions. Things like, operating agreements, buy sell agreements, trusts, all that kind of stuff, right? And we made sure there was insurance in place. And, we might have a casual conversation with their ops people about, um, the workflow of things, if something were to happen to them. But the biggest thing that was always missing was what they knew. If we were to actually remove them from the organization, what would break? And we saw during the pandemic an inordinate number of business owners go down, either through incapacity or through death. Some primarily, arising directly from COVID, other from comorbidities, right? Which we can see now during flu season. We can see more older people get heart attacks or strokes. And so we saw too many people going down. And although they had legal or operational things in place, when those around them didn't know what they knew, the businesses imploded. So
Mhm.
yes, it does manifest as a critical operational flaw.
I see. And it should be something that should be addressed sooner than later, not just towards the end. When you're thinking of a transition, it could be because of things that may just happen in life, right? Like health related things.
Yeah, yeah, and it's not just our own health, right? It's as we're getting older, um, and it's not just about getting older, but as we get more mature and experience more things in life, stuff could happen to our spouse, and we have to step away and support them on their health journey, right? Or if something happens to our kids, most of us aren't going to just say, well, they'll figure it out and dive back into our practice. We're going to want to go support our kids and fly around the country because they're somewhere else now and help them. But you can't do that if you can't step away from the business. And if those around you, can't be empowered.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that's absolutely right. So many factors to consider uh, to have this in place. Now, let's talk a little bit about continuity versus succession.
Sure.
What's the difference between succession planning and true business continuity, and why do people confuse the two?
Um, I think people confuse the two because in the industry, they're often just used interchangeably. And I think it's just become more of a casual thing, and it's nobody's fault. But the significant difference is in continuity, we look at what would happen to the machine, the operations, the organization, if we were to remove something from it, if there was to be a disruption that is more sudden in nature. And how do we keep it moving absent that one thing that gets taken away or even added, right? There's something could get added that throws things off. But usually we talk about in the context of planning for owners with continuity, what would happen if they went down for a period of time, but then they were to come back in? What world would they come back to?
Mhm.
Could their organization continue for a week, a month, a quarter without them? Could that continuity, what does continuity exist if they are only around for once a week or for at half capacity, or if there's a sudden change? Succession is more about the longer term intentional planning for a complete takeover of ownership, right? And so you're dealing more with a short term versus a long term replacement of leadership.
Got it. Now, why would you say naming a successor is not enough to protect the business?
Well, have you ever given the keys to your business to your successor and said, "Hey, I'm going to go take off for a week, run this thing"? You've named your successor. So, and we all can laugh at that, right? But how about take, maybe the one of the top people in your organization. Don't give them any advance notice. Don't give them any prep, and say, I'm going to take off for the next 3 months. Run the business. What would break? What would go right? What would go wrong? How much would that cost? If they had to spend X amount of time searching for something or figuring something out, what would that cost? Because not everything is doom and gloom. Many things are figure outable, but they come with a cost. And so that's a pretty valuable exercise to run. You need to prepare somebody. They're going to have their own skill sets, but they need to have what you know in order to be successful. There wasn't a very good transition plan when Elon Musk took over Twitter on his first day, and he got so frustrated and ended up firing like half of the team. Their onboarding for their own CEO was not very good. But what does your onboarding look like for somebody that you're going to hand over the business to? You need more than a name.
That's right. Would you say you should alert your team about the succession ahead of time? And if so, how early on should that uh, notice be given?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, One thing that we found is so many business owners don't want their team knowing that they're planning for this, as if their team doesn't look at them and say, "Oh, they're in their 60s or in their 70s. At some point, there's going to be a change around here." It's like this secret that they think that nobody knows, and they don't want it to get out of the bag that they're like looking for buyers or they're planning their exit. Everybody knows. Um, we've all seen those TV shows. We've all seen those movies. We've worked in other places before. We get it. It's important to always plant the seed in mind for everyone that the organization is resilient, that there is planning in place, that people will be taken care of, and that the planning is being done through
Mhm.
proper advice and guidance with working a professional. You can figure out who you should be letting know and when, right? And how much information you give. But it's never telling everybody everything all at once. It is going to be very planful, and it's done in layers.
I see. For it to be effective
Oh
or
yeah,
to prevent mass turnover after transition has completed.
yeah. Um, you want to control emotions and reactivity.
And that should come from the business owner, like from that tier downwards, not just a responsibility given to the manager.
Yeah. This is definitely when it comes to continuity and succession. This is a top down approach. kind of like when adopting some type of major new technology in a business
Mhm.
or the way the business is going to be run. If we don't have top-down buy-in and leadership there, it will all fall apart at middle management.
Mhm. How does continuity planning apply, even when the owner has no intention of selling or stepping away?
Continuity is going to preserve what they have in place should they need to step away for any reason. There's this thought that disability insurance or business interruption insurance or other types of liability insurance will cover an absence. And they'll cover parts of it, but there's going to be major gaps that nobody tells them about if they were to leave their organization. And um, they need to understand the financial impacts of a lack of planning for continuity. They may come back to a business they no longer recognize anymore. And then they're back to building. And if they've spent their whole careers building what they had, and it's just a well-oiled machine prior to their departure, and they come back to something they don't recognize anymore, do they even have the stamina and the strength to build back up what they had? You know, a lot of dental practices have key people in the organization that have been there for 20, 30, 35 years. You know, if you lose those people in your absence, when was the last time you tried to interview for that position? When was the last time you tried to place somebody from a younger generation into that role of somebody who knew you and knew exactly how you liked things? Can really be disruptive.
Now, going back to transition, are there any signals that tell investors or acquirers that a business is people resilient versus fragile?
When someone starts digging into the flow of the chain of command, if they see that all roads are kind of leading back to the owner or top leadership, that's where they know that there's incredible fragility. The people aren't empowered and it's worth a ton less to them.
Uh, that's a very good point. And we do see quite a bit of that, especially in non-corporate dental offices.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and oftentimes we also see spouses get involved, even though they may not have anything to do with dentistry.
Yes. Yes. The old spouse can be wonderful at helping manage some things in the office manager, managing the books, helping with some of the hiring or the people or the training or whatever. But um, if they're going to be leaving the business, they need to be replaced too. And if they are interfering or a problem in the business, then it's going to be a problem after transition. So some very uncomfortable conversations are often had in professional service businesses that are run by spouses.
That's right. I'm just curious when you have to deal with one of your clients where you do realize that one of the key people uh, in the operations is the spouse, and you have to break the news that that person has to be replaced. How does that conversation usually go? I mean, if you don't mind sharing a story for our listeners.
Yeah, sure. I'm lucky because I don't have to get into it quite as much. So, for context, what our business currently does is um, we recognize that for different types of transitions, the most prepared leaders are able to get everything out of their heads with us, document the heck out of it, do it really fast, like we're talking a month's time, and then issue spot everything that goes wrong in the business during a potential continuity, right? That's what we do. And then we map it all out so that other professionals can help them fix it and have those conversations. So when we see it, we take everything out of their head and build all that out. And then we identify that there may be a spousal issue. And we point it out among a litany of, potentially 50, 100 things that should be fixed before a transitional event occurs or even continuity, a gap in continuity occurs. So it's a little bit easier for us. We get to just say, hey, here's a problem. Now go talk to this consultant, this advisor, this attorney, this CPA, this coach to go fix it. Um, in my past life, those conversations were a little bit more uncomfortable. I would make recommendations for coaching for the two of them, for therapy, because usually this type of relationship in the business will extend to their personal life as well, right? It's not just confined to the office.
Mhm.
Um,
I can see that. I can definitely see that, and that's why I'm glad you brought it up because they sometimes do go hand in hand. And recommending something like going to a therapist might be the right approach.
Yeah, it might be. If therapy is the medium that is the solution here, right? I'm a big believer in therapy, and especially in the right circumstances. But they may not have major childhood issues or trauma or things to work through or relationship issues per se. Their issue may be more in the business context of things and tied up in maybe in some ego or in some false assumption that only they can do what they're doing, or just not being classically trained in business and understanding the scalability of what's needed. And so in that case, they may need a business coach to work with the two
Mhm.
of them
Mhm.
and sit them down and map out where things should go. They may need some consultant. So it's not necessarily that their relationship is flawed. It's that their relationship may not serve the current needs of the business during transition.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, I agree. I'm specifically thinking of some of the spouses that may have took on their role in the business as part of their identity, and whenever that transition conversation comes up, they're fearful of losing that part of their self, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. And that dynamic duo relationship may have worked really well for them for so long and got them where they are. It's just not something that's sustainable for the next group of people taking over.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we're reaching towards the end of our episode. I just have a couple more questions. But before I ask those questions, was there anything that you feel like you would like for our listeners to know of? Uh, Tips, tricks, or some suggestions?
Yeah, I would say one good tip or trick is every time somebody on the team is coming to them for their thought or their opinion or their judgment or their decision on something, identify that um, as something to fix, right? So that in the future they don't have to come back to you for that, and document it. Either if their primary way of communicating with people is through an email, every time one of those things comes up, shoot a quick email on your phone back to yourself or to an office manager, to somebody, and saying, "Hey, I was just asked this question. Here's my answer, and here's why I gave an answer that way, or here's how I came to that answer." And start just handing off your own way of doing things, your judgment, so that that can be built into a little file, and people around you can start being more empowered. You can do that with voice notes and keep them all there, and then dump them on somebody at the end of the month. But that's if you can start fixing the problem of people coming back to you for everything, that's a great place to start.
Oh, that's a great tip. It's basically passing on the baton in the sense that, you're the sensei, but then, you have all your proteges that can access this folder uh, to address some of the questions that may come up.
Yep.
That's
That's
great.
that's scratching the surface. And then when they're ready to turn that into hundreds of pages of how brilliant their minds are, and they want to hand off that genius, that's where we come in.
Well, that's where the Control F feature comes in, I think, on the keyboard.
Yes, that is where Control F or Command F comes in documents, and in the future it'll be in the form of engaging with an agentic version of yourself.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Now, back to my question. What questions should every founder ask themselves to test how dependent the business is on them personally?
Okay, so I would say go through a week, and at the end of every day, Well, throughout each day, document, kind of similar to what I had just said a moment ago, document every question that somebody asked you as the owner for your decision on something or your judgment or your opinion or where they were dependent upon you for an answer to move something forward. Document every one of those
Mhm.
and then compile those. And by the end of the week, how many things came back to you? And then maybe categorize them. Put a
Mhm.
little code or a little tag next to it saying, okay, this was in operations, this was in finance, this was in marketing, this was in patient care, this was in relationships or HR. And you'll start to see where you are way too involved in certain aspects of your business.
Okay. Now, related to mindset, what kind of a shift leaders need to make to build a company that can basically run without them? And I know it would vary depending on how long they've owned the business, but let's start with business owners that have used the business as part of their legacy.
So the question is,
I guess to elaborate on it, it would be, you know, what kind of a mindset shift would a business owner need to have, especially if they've tied themselves with the identity of the business?
hmm, one of the biggest mindset shifts is where do you get your love? If you find that you're going to your business and you get your love there, then that is where a serious mindset shift needs to happen. We all go to different things to receive whatever version of love it is that we need, whether it's respect or whether it's being heard or being right. And these are obviously therapy type of concepts to work on as well. And they stem from childhood typically, but they're also major mindset shifts that can and should happen so that your identity is not completely intertwined in your business.
Mhm.
Um, and it may mean finding your love elsewhere. And it does exist, but it won't happen by accident. It has to happen with intention and with working with the right professionals.
That's a great answer. And I love the fact that you use the word love instead of validation, because that's true. I think for a lot of us with businesses, that's what it is. We're
Mm.
ultimately like little kids looking for love, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different flavors of business owners who are getting very interesting things from when they show up at the office.
Mhm.
And uh, not only do they need to disentangle that identity, but they need to figure out what that next chapter looks like wherever they're going. And it doesn't have to be retirement. For me, after I sold my practice, the next chapter was the next business that I was going to create. But I sure as hell did not get my love from the next business because I had put in the work in the first one to learn how to remove, myself from the business.
Mm. Well, that might be the fear in itself, right? That, hey, well, if I go to the next business or the next chapter of my life, what if I don't receive that love that I received from this? Maybe that's the deterrent.
Yeah. And the scary truth is they're not going to receive that love in the same way. It's going to be different. But change is inevitable. So do you want it to be a painful experience or do you want it to be a really meaningful one? But that comes from work on yourself. That's not work on the
Mhm.
business.
Mhm. Mhm. If you could give one warning to founders who believe this can wait, what would it be?
They're right. It can. How much do they want to pay for it? Do you want to lose a ton of time? Do you want to lose a ton of money? Do you want to lose a ton of respect that you've built up from that around you? How much are you willing to risk for waiting? It's just like anything. People will figure it out. Sometimes it'll be horrific and your business will completely go under and implode. But more often, it'll be a very painful, very expensive experience that will change, the lives of those around you for worse, and they will think differently about you. And is that what you want? If you don't want that, then you plan. And the planning isn't also just for a what if scenario. Most of this type of planning and work actually results in greater bottom line and greater time back pretty immediately. So it's not just like an insurance type of approach. It's good business practice to plan for things like this.
Mhm. So I'm glad you actually hit upon some of the qualitative side of this decision making and not just the quantitative side, because that has an active role in play in all of this. And
As a
I
near
think
20-year estate attorney, you can't take your gold with you when you die.
there you go. Speaking from experience.
Hmm.
Well, yeah, yeah. And I think that's what you were also talking about when you were talking about maturity and not just about, being older. Uh, gives you certain perspectives. And a lot of times, regardless of your age, it's mostly with the maturity part, where you currently stand in your life. I think some self assessments need to be made. And of course, the aid of professionals around you that well versed in this field to guide you through the steps. Now, this leads me to my last question. What does a truly resilient business look like in 5 or 10 years down the line?
A truly resilient business?
Mhm,
Well-documented policy systems and procedures,
mhm,
very clear roles in the organization.
mhm.
It involves effective use where it should be done of artificial intelligence. And yes, absolutely still, even in dental practices. Um, Maybe it's not cyborgs doing any of the work in their patients' mouths, right? It may be, but it might not be. Um, but there's certainly going to be a lot of technology used effectively on the back end. Um, and I would say, yeah, I think that's it.
Okay. So effective usage of the resources that are available out there, whether it be technology or human resources, and documenting things and coming up with systems where you can truly one day become an owner absentee business, where your role essentially is a bonus to the business and not just the only component that brings in the bottom line.
Yeah, and you know what? I'll add to it also that I think that more dental practices are going to you know, continue to go the route more like accounting firms and
Mhm.
medical practices where they need to really understand the finance world and private equity and the M&A space as leaders, right? They need to prepare for that kind of stuff because there's going to be so many opportunities for them to either create the practice that they want to create or exit and do well for their families. But without that business knowledge, that savvy, that being prepared, too many opportunities are going to pass them by when everybody else around them is is
That's right.
is enjoying the fruits of their labor.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, the private equity has penetrated the market for a while now, even in the dental world.
Yeah.
And absolutely right. During transition or M&A, the people that can speak that language definitely have more options on the table. Um, Sometimes the DSOs, the private equity firms, they may present better offers. Specifically, if you're still willing to work for the next 5, 7 years before the complete transition happens. Well, Matt, it was a pleasure having you on our episode today. I loved having our conversation. I hope a lot of our listeners will find value in what we talked about. And if any of our listeners would like to reach out to you, if they have additional questions, would you mind sharing your contact information here?
No, happy to do so. And it's been great spending time with you too, Ash. So if anyone is interested in figuring out how to start having these discussions and hand off their genius and build out that system so that those around them are prepared, they can reach us at COtingency.com. That's COT for it's for the plan for your company after you. And they can find me, Matthew Gruber, or COtingency on LinkedIn, and we're pretty responsive.
Awesome. Well, it was our pleasure to have you, Matt. Thank you so much again. Thanks for listening today. Be sure to subscribe to Beyond by Wings on your favorite podcast platform. For more information, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, or reach out to us on our website. You can also shoot us an email at info@eandassociates.com.